Lifeblood by Richard L. Elsliger. Troy Howe watched his gas gauge with a wary and vigilant eye. The spray of his headlights cast disturbing September shadows along the country road, a two-lane strip of blacktop that cut through the heart of Utah. The soft glow of the dash lights provided him a modicum of comfort, but still, if he didn't find a gas station soon, he would need to pull over and assess his situation. He maintained a steady speed, a good 10 miles per hour under the posted limit, neither accelerating nor slowing his thirsty Challenger, leaving a swirling trail of red and yellow leaves in his wake. He said goodbye to his life in California, and said goodbye to Bryndís, a California-born Icelander who told him she had other aspirations that involved Hollywood. She told him he no longer fit her plans. That was 2 weeks ago, and in those 2 weeks, Troy had the time to think. The California lifestyle had crushed his finances, and he barely could keep up with his spending habits, so he made the decision to head home and restart his life in Indiana, back to the small town of his boyhood. Troy adjusted his rearview mirror, and a pair of watery sapphire gems reflected back to him. He wiped away a tear from his cheek and ran a hand through his wavy red hair, the same red as the special octane red paint splashed upon the bodywork of his Challenger from the factory. Well, he still had the car, a small consolation prize to alleviate some of the hurt left behind. He spent all of his savings to have this car, an exceedingly rare factory drag car, and wondered if his ownership might have precipitated the breakup. He might never have an answer, but it made no difference now. He put such intrigues behind him and drove on. The gas needle made another adjustment and dipped below the 1/8 mark. The voracious Hemi engine demanded more fuel, and the supercharger begged to whine, but Troy kept their wants in check. Troy blinked several times and squinted through his windshield, scanning the road ahead for any metal sign that might offer promise of fuel or accommodation. He motored on for another mile and began to perspire despite the cool autumn night seeping into the cabin through the driver's open window. Far in the distance, a road sign returned Troy's high-beam headlights. A small rush of adrenaline surged through his veins. Could this be the sign he needed? Troy lay on the throttle a little harder. He closed in fast, the supercharger engaged in response at the sudden demand for speed. Troy saw a ubiquitous arrow pointed to an off-ramp a half-mile in the distance. The arrow took aim at a gasoline station. Troy let out a sigh and let off the throttle. The supercharger whine vanished into the ether, man and machine rolling headlong toward the exit. The Demon Challenger and all of its 808 horsepower proved to be an insatiable creature for petroleum, coupled with high RPMs, such ferocious consumption that came with a high price tag given current gas prices. With the present trajectory of gasoline prices, Troy considered he might need to consult a loan officer to buy the next tank of fuel, or hang up his keys forever and join the cult of public transportation. He turned the steering wheel slight right and navigated the darkened off-ramp. The stop sign lit up at the end of the narrow blacktop and displayed a secondary arrow pointing the way to petroleum salvation. Troy wheeled left and crossed over a bridge. In the distance, a lonely light flickered, indicative of the gas station he so highly coveted in this exact moment of his life. The gas gauge dipped again, and Troy caught this minuscule change from the periphery of his eyes. He tracked the gas station and watched it grow in size, the Challenger's thick tires glued to the asphalt, registering every crack and deviation. "Don't worry, my sweet little monster, gas is on the way. You can feed very soon." Troy patted the dashboard. In seconds, Troy was upon the gas station and swung the Challenger in, coasting on fumes. The Demon Challenger demanded the highest octane due to its temperamental engineering and high-strung tolerances. He saw no sign suggestive of a price per gallon. The billboard at the entranceway showed a series of zeros. Gas must be free here. Troy pulled up beside the pumps on the far end of the station and shut down the engine. He exited the Demon and went in search for the desired octane. The cost per gallon at this point was irrelevant. At the pump, the price was zeroed out, and none of the selections offered an octane number. In place of the octane numbers were letters. One pump handle read O+, another read A+, still another read AB-. Troy struggled to make sense of it, and then he understood. These were blood types. Why would they list blood types at the pumps? Troy spotted decals of bats and jack-o'-lanterns plastered on the plate glass of the store. Very clever. Troy left the pumps behind and headed in the direction of the store for answers. An overhead metal doorbell jingled, a rather outmoded accoutrement in the modern age of electric door chimes, but Troy thought it quaint. The cashier sat at the counter, a pair of python eyes fixated on Troy. "Yes, I was wondering which of your pumps sell high octane? Funny Halloween joke, by the way, blood types for octane. I like it." "What made you think it was a joke?" asked the cashier. He looked at Troy with a stony face, devoid of humor. "Yes, well, nonetheless, I still need to know which handle pours the high octane. I have a thirsty demon out there, you see." Troy pointed through the window to the lone octane-red Challenger, waiting to be filled with liquid gold. Troy's index finger drooped when he saw a crowd had formed around his car. The crowd looked odd, their features less than human, many of them with misplaced eyes and misshapen faces. One of them got in the car and sat behind the wheel. Troy acted fast, sprinting to the exit door to defuse the situation. He pushed on the door, but it would not open. He pushed harder, but the door stayed shut. "Where do you think you're going?" asked the cashier, his face unwavering, his demeanor oozing with deadpan attitude. Troy pushed on the door harder. "What is this? Let me out of here." Troy pounded on the glass. "Hey, get away from my car!" The group looked to Troy with a collective stare, then turned away in unison and resumed their inspection of the demon. One of them opened the hood and examined the engine bay. Troy hit the window again, then marched to the cashier and slapped the bulletproof glass with his palm. "I don't know what sort of establishment you're running here, but I want some gas. And I don't know who the hell your friends are out there, but they need to get the hell away from my car. I need gas. Is that too much to ask?" "We don't sell gas here," said the cashier, the muscles of his face paralyzed with any hint at expression. Troy took a step back. "So what do you sell?" "You saw the pumps, didn't you? What does O positive mean to you?" "Funny," said Troy, "but your joke is played out. Look, just sell me some gas and I'll be on my way." "Well, as I said before, we don't sell gas. We don't need gas to run our vehicles. We need blood." A slight tingle of fear jabbed at Troy like a hypodermic needle. Was this guy crazy? "Joke's over, give me the gas," said Troy, waving a $100 bill pulled from his wallet. He shifted from foot to foot. Troy paced and watched his Challenger from the window. He assessed the crowd of mutants gathered around his car. "What's your blood type?" the cashier asked. "None of your business," said Troy. "I'm calling the cops." Troy reached into his empty pocket, then looked to his car. The crowd turned their collective attention in the direction of Troy again. 3 of the biggest brawlers broke off from the rest, followed by a woman dressed in white, and they walked toward the store. Troy watched their movements, welded to the spot where he stood, unable to formulate a plan. When they arrived at the entrance door, Troy made a visual calculation. He didn't stand a chance against these 3 guys. He needed to find a rear exit door. Troy sprinted to the back of the store, past the cashier who watched from behind the bulletproof glass, a morbid and dispassionate spectator with the look of someone who had observed this scenario play out more than once. Troy executed a fast assessment, unable to pinpoint any alternate means of egress, so he pushed open the bathroom door and slammed it shut, securing the lock. Troy heard voices converse with each other in subtle tones beyond the locked door. He backed up against the sink and looked for a weapon, finding only a paper towel dispenser and an electric hand dryer. The mirror, well, it was bolted to the wall, and he had nothing to shatter the glass. "You can come out," said a voice. "We're not going to hurt you." Troy could not believe his situation. He had no words, only a crystallizing frost that infiltrated and filled his every extremity. I just want some gas and I'll be gone," he said. "Well, you must already know by now that we don't sell gas at this station. Didn't you read the signs at the pumps?" "You people are crazy," said Troy. "Well, maybe," said one of the voices. "But we did find a solution to the energy crisis." Troy watched the door handle move, followed by a hard thud. The deadbolt rattled from the impact. "Come on out," said another, a sultry woman's voice. "You can't stay in there forever, dear." Troy made no answer. Another thud against the door, more powerful than the last, knocked the door off its hinges and ripped the deadbolt away from the wall. One of the men kicked on the frame and sent the door tumbling to the floor. 3 large men flooded into the restroom and grabbed Troy, one on each side, while the third delivered a devastating fist to Troy's stomach, making him collapse. They dragged him from the bathroom on his knees and dropped him to the floor in the snack food aisle. One of the men removed a syringe from a medical bag and stuck it in Troy's arm, pulling on the plunger and extracting a small volume of blood. He shook the syringe and handed it to the woman. She removed a kit from her medical bag, and Troy noticed a Red Cross armband stitched to her white uniform. She took the sample and ran a blood test. In less than 2 minutes, she shook the test strip in the air while more of the group crowded around. "We have an O negative here," she exclaimed, and the group cheered. "That's high-octane blood," said a voice. "Let's get this one bagged," said another. The 2 men picked Troy up and pulled him out the door, feet dragging on the pavement. An ambulance pulled to the store front, and the men loaded Troy in the back and strapped him to a gurney. "What are you doing?" said Troy. "Where are you taking me?" "Not to worry, you're going to a better place," said one of the men. "A much better place," said the other. He closed the door to the back of the ambulance, and both men sat guard over Troy during the ride. Troy strained to see out the window. The ambulance started, and its engine howled with performance modifications, a bizarre timbre of whistling death unmatched to any fossil fuel engine. The tone of the engine unsettled Troy. They were on the move, and he struggled to get a bearing on their direction. The carpet of night gave him no useful landmarks to memorialize, and he laid his head back. Thoughts raced through his mind. He regretted leaving California. He missed Brindis, and he regretted buying the Demon Challenger. So many mistakes he'd fallen prey to that got him to this juncture. He didn't deserve this. All he wanted was a tank of gas. His captors looked at him as they would a trapped insect. Troy had nothing more to say to them. The ambulance ride lasted about 20 minutes, then ended under a series of overhead streetlights. The back doors opened, and the bigger of the 2 men brought Troy out on the gurney, the other brawler pushing while the first one pulled. Clattery wheels rattled over uneven pavement toward a large warehouse. Troy's heart rate elevated to triple digits, and he hyperventilated. He worked to keep his physiology in check and slowed his breathing to focus on how he would escape. A door the size of an airplane hangar slid open, and they wheeled him into a massive hospital the size of a football field. Thousands of unconscious people lay in uniform rows, reclined in their hospital beds with IV bags attached. Needles extracted blood from their arms and filled individual blood bags strapped to their bed rails. Troy struggled against his bindings, unable to move but a few inconsequential inches on either side. He had no more words to express. He knew he wasn't going to talk his way out of this situation. They wheeled him across the full length of the hangar, surrounded by thousands of people, reclined in their beds, dripping precious lifeblood into plastic bags. Any meaningful life they once had was now terminated. Troy's gurney came to a stop, and he watched the space open up. 2 orderlies disconnected tubes and needles from exposed arms. "This one's used up," said one orderly to the other. "Agreed," said the other. "Bring her to the incinerator." Troy watched them wheel the dead woman away, watched her vanish into obscurity through this grotesque landscape of human harvest. The orderlies registered terror on Troy's face. "They're there now. You're going to do fine here," said one of the men. "No need to be afraid." The nurse from the gas station materialized with her medical bag. She removed a needle from the bag along with a drug-laced vial, filling the hypodermic. Troy's eyes widened, and he fought against his bindings. "Wait," said Troy. "Before you start, do you want to tell me what's happening and why?" "Well," she said in a calm voice, "we in our little community figured out how to turn human blood into a combustible fuel source. As it turns out, human blood is highly combustible when mixed with our little secret sauce that the chemists figured out. A little goes a long way, and as luck would have it, human blood is renewable, wouldn't you know? From people just like you." "You're all insane," said Troy. "Well, you might think so, but sacrifices have to be made to solve our community energy crisis. I mean, you can't expect us to go back to riding horses, can you? And the cost of gasoline these days? Wow." The nurse inserted the needle into Troy's arm and pushed down on the plunger. "Your Challenger's quite the ride, I hear," said the orderly. "To hell with you," said Troy. "To hell with me?" laughed the orderly. "To hell with you. After all, you're the one that bought a Demon Challenger. Go figure." Troy slammed his head to the gurney. "You will all burn in hell." "Well, maybe someday, but not today," said the orderly. "Speaking of hell, we have special technicians from those nether regions. that will make your demon engine run on O-negative blood. What a coincidence that you happen to have that very blood type. Troy writhed against his restraints and made fists. Why was this happening? How did he get here? The sedative took effect and the questions faded away. Troy's eyes closed for the last time, and a small stream of blood commenced its free flow through tubing to the blood bag at his bedside. Another orderly wheeled an IV bag next to Troy and injected a needle into Troy's other arm, infusing him with needed nutrients to keep him hydrated. The nurse inserted a nasogastric tube to deliver food to their new patient's stomach. The nurse filled out a report that verified the new patient's admittance to their facility. She wired a toe tag to his right foot that read O-negative. Troy's mind drifted to pleasant images of his childhood, thinking about those lazy summer days that seemed to go on without end. Troy cracked a smile in his unconscious state, and the orderly folded Troy's hands over his chest. The nurse and orderly leaned over their new patient and returned a smile for Troy's selfless contribution.